Good morning. My name is David Levine. I'm the global leader for the Digital Transformation Division at New Era Technologies. This is my 9th year at this conference. It's my favorite event of the year. I missed the first day, sadly. Broke my heart yesterday, so I hope you had a great day yesterday. This is session 10E, Winning with Data, Lessons from the Global 100 Leaders in the Data World. And Paul Hatley is going to lead this conversation. If you have any questions, at any time during the presentation, probably mostly at the end, I'll be glad to bring this microphone around and hand it to you so that you can ask those questions and they can be recorded for posterity, and you can watch them back later online, see how smart you were in your questioning. Paul?
Great. Thanks, David, and thank you all for joining the session. Hopefully you can hear me. We'll wait for a few more stragglers to come in. We good to go? Right. So yes, we've titled this session Winning with Data, Lessons from the Top 100 Data Leaders in the US and Europe. I'm Paul Hatley, so I'm Managing Director of DataIQ, and co-hosting this session with me is Ari Kaplan, who is sat right here, who's Head of Evangelism at Databricks. But you'll also notice we have 3 of those top 100 leaders sitting in the room with us. We're very fortunate to have Diana Schildhaus, Chief Analytics and Insights Officer from Colgate-Palmolive. Angeli Reddy, she's the Chief Data Officer at Dow Jones, and Deepak Jose, who's the Global Head and Senior Director of Data Analytics at Mars Wrigley. So we're going to be hearing directly from the panel in just a second. Before we head into that, a lot of you probably haven't heard of DataIQ, so I've just got 1 or 2 slides about us to give you a bit of a background to what we do and our mission. So we've been going just over 10 years now, and we started really to kind of fulfill kind of a need we saw around data leaders where they didn't really have a community. So we built a community of data leaders, senior data leaders, CDOs, data directors, and so on, really to give them a space to share ideas, exchange knowledge, to really kind of have a forum for that, because we identified that, as we've seen over the last couple of days, the data profession can often feel quite isolated, and it's very demanding in terms of the pressures. So we've built a community of data leaders and a membership model. As part of that, we've also been able to build out assessments and benchmarks to give the community an idea of what good looks like. And as part of that, things like data literacy assessments and so on are kind of key to that. So that last point there, what our mission and our mantra is to shape the future of data culture. So our language is all around data literacy, data fluency, business partnering, stakeholder management, all of those soft skills and emotional intelligence that are key to data-driven organizations. So that's really the essence of what we do. How do we do that? And we're really here to talk today about the DataIQ 100. And again, we've developed this program over the last 10 years. And we recognize the most influential people in data working in data. And to give you a feel here, and it feels like about a month ago, but some of the DataIQ team are here. And that picture on the left is an event we held this time last week to bring senior data leaders together. We did this in London at a venue called the Hurlingham Club, which is, for those of you who know London, is in southwest London. It's as quintessentially English as you can get. There's bowls on the green and lawn tennis and croquet, and it's a beautiful venue. But as you can see there, the discussion's really similar, if I'm honest, to what we've heard at these sessions today, this morning, and yesterday, around the challenges that data leaders are facing. Obviously, Gen AI came up as a huge topic, as we've seen over the last couple of days, but also there are many other challenges facing our data leaders, as we know, and we're going to talk to the panel about those. And the picture on the right there is our #1 data leader in the UK and Europe, who is Sanjeevan Bala, who is the Chief Data Officer at ITV, who are a huge broadcaster in the UK. We chose him because he started the role 18 months, 2 years ago. It was greenfield. There was really nothing there, lots of disparate pieces of data and people working in data. But he brought those teams together He's very well respected in the industry, a real champion, a cheerleader for the profession, and a multiple award winner as well. So we've recognized him for that, particularly in the UK and Europe. Speaking of awards, we also run an annual awards program where we celebrate successes in data. So we have categories like Best Data Champion and Best Data Literacy Initiative, Best Data Analytics Team. There's 26 different categories. And so that's another way of us trying to celebrate the industry and celebrate success in the industry. And so watch this space, because early next year we're going to be bringing that awards program to the US as well. Okay, back to the 100. How do we choose the DataIQ 100? As you can imagine, it's hard. There are thousands, tens of thousands of data leaders across the globe who are all doing great things. And some of those self-select, some of them come to us and say, hey, I'm doing a great job, and these are the reasons why, and we'll certainly consider those. Others are kind of nominated by colleagues, and we look at those as well. And a huge portion are curated by DataIQ, so we'll go out and research the market and look at those leaders who should be recognized. Because often within this profession, as you know, data people can be quite introverted and not necessarily the best promoters of themselves. So we're trying to shine a spotlight on those people who wouldn't necessarily hold their hands up to doing a great job. So there's three different components. We look at leadership, and tends to be the most senior data person within that company. CDOs, essentially. Sometimes it's about status as well. So do they have a voice within the data community? Are they listened to and respected? Are they attending events like this on panels? Are they speaking? Are they creating white papers and so on? And also, and finally, they need to support us as DataIQ and our mission around creating a vibrant data culture and data community. So they really have to align with our values. So those are the kind of three metrics we use to choose the 100. As part of that, and Ari will be, I'm sure, using some of these questions with the panel in just a second, but we do ask some quite specific questions of the people in the 100, just to get a measure of the state of the industry. And because we've been doing this for so long, that gives us a really good benchmark around the changes in the industry. And it's that middle question there. How are you developing the data literacy of your organization, which really speaks to data culture, that I think we really kind of want to focus on for this session. But I'm sure all of the other topics are just as useful for everyone to hear about. And I've just got a couple more slides before we talk to our guests on the panel. The main challenges from the DataIQ 100, and it's been really interesting for the DataIQ team, because obviously we've been sitting in on a lot of the sessions over the last couple of days, and the challenges from the UK and Europe are really similar to what we're hearing in the US. And these are the kind of four main components. So structuring data teams for success comes up time and time again. Decentralization, centralization, hub and spoke, federated approach, centers of excellence. What's the best operating model to kind of take your business forward? Comes up a lot, but also that speaks to retaining talent, nurturing talent. Where do you find that talent? How many data scientists do you need versus, I don't know, prompt engineers or whatever? It's all those kinds of questions that come up within the community. Building a data culture, we're going to talk about in just a second, so I'll skip over that. Demonstrating the value of data comes up a lot across all of our 100. How do you get C-suite buying? It was a really good term that Tom Davenport used yesterday, which is that visible value of data. How do you make the kind of what you're doing visible to the C-suite? And really, why is the tenure of a CDO only 2.5 or 3 years? And that final point, which again comes up a lot, is managing internal politics. How do you engage with the C-suite? How do you engage with technology? Where's that alignment? What's the kind of best fit for that? How do you engage with external consultants who come in and tell you how to do the job better? How do you manage that process? So hopefully those will resonate for those of you in the room who kind of experience these challenges as well across our leaders. And just focusing quickly on data culture, we've pulled out some of the key quotes here around the importance of building data culture within the business. Talking business outcomes, not technical outcomes. I thought that was a great term from one of the 100. Include data as a lever in your overall value creation plan. Again, that talks to proving the value of data. And I love this last quote here. I don't often read slides verbatim, but I think this is important to do. Along with business fluency comes business empathy. It's not enough to derive an answer. It is just as important to help our business partners understand how to get there. That was actually from Angelique, who's at number 2 in our list. And she's CDO of Capital One. And really that quote was all around data storytelling and culture and business partnering and engaging better with your stakeholders, which is really the essence of data culture. And if this is just one takeaway slide, because I just wanted to put a top 10 of all the kind of terms that came up across our 100 in terms of what they are doing to influence data culture. And again, you'll know a lot of these, and we've heard a lot more about these over the last couple of days. Hackathons, user groups, internal learning hubs, that notion of continuous learning, and I'm not sure, again, why all of those are one. I've just noticed that. They're all number one, right?
Very important.
They're all equal importance. It's the same with the 100, apart from the top 10. And again, I'm sure we'll hear from Diana as well about number 1, data analytics academies. I'm sure will come up. I heard this notion of data, the data citizen as well yesterday, and that role of the enabler that sits between the data office and the rest of the business. Sometimes they're called enablers and translators, but how does that work? And there's also, and I thought was interesting, bringing in external thought leaders as well. And we know a lot of really, we've heard from them already in the conference, these brilliant people who have a lot to say, and actually a lot of companies are bringing those people in to talk to the wider business about the, how to drive that culture. Lost the slides, great. Thank you. And also, we're going to hear from Ari as well from Databricks, who is another influential person within the data industry to kind of tell those stories. Okay, to the 100. You'll recognize some of these pictures because quite a few of them are in the room, which is great to see. And obviously, we've got some on the panel. Have a look at our website. We'll put that at the end in terms of looking at all of the 100 from the US. Actually, it's not just 100. We also have some influencers across the industry as well. So that would be people that you've heard from, Tom Davenport and so on, will be in that influencer list. And we also include some key partners and vendors, people like McKinsey and Avanade and Databricks, and so on and so forth. All of the kind of key partners and suppliers that you'll know, we also include in that list. So the 100 itself is the one on the left brand side. That's all the companies, but there's some additional components of the 100. Okay, final slide, and we'll count this stuff. So we released this a couple of months ago. We announced a short list. It's a bit like we run it down like a top 10, and no one really knows where they're going to be positioned, and we did it live, so we were kind of flying by the seat of our pants a little bit, but it worked. And Diana is number 1, as you can see on the top left-hand corner. So congratulations to Diana. But you can see here in terms of the credibility and the seniority and the influence that these people have and how we choose. And this is why it's such a hard job to even get to that top 10. And I must say, we don't grade 11 to 100. Everyone's number 11 in our book, so it's kind of the way that works. Good. Okay, I'm going to pause there. I think we'll hand over to the panel because you don't really want to hear from me. You want to hear from the experts. So I'm going to hand over to Ari Kaplan, who is head of evangelism at Databricks, who's going to be conducting the panel.
Great. Thanks, Paul.
All right.
And we do love hearing from you. Absolutely. That was at the presentation. I'll lock you in there. Yeah, so thank you, Paul. Thank you, DataIQ. Thanks the panelists, everyone here in person, and There's a lot of people, I understand, live streaming. Get your questions in as we go on. There'll be time at the end. So thank you for the warm welcome. Paul asked me to give a little bit on my background and a few of my thoughts on how the data industry has been progressing and where we are today and the next couple of years. So Ari Kaplan, head of evangelism at Databricks, and being here in Boston, I know this is like a huge crowd from all over the place. It would be remiss to neglect that I did a lot of work. If you've seen the movie Moneyball, that was partly based on my experiences and life. I'm asked to be a consultant to the film, which is a unique experience, taking data and information and applying it to, in this case, sports analytics. So starting way back earlier in my career, I was an undergrad at Caltech. If you've heard of the Big Bang Theory school, that was pretty much my life. I won't tell you which character I most associate with. But yeah, came up with better ways to use information to help players understand their strengths, weaknesses, and habits. And then it kind of really took off. I was told I was one of the first 4 people to be employed by a sports organization, and now it's an industry of tens of thousands of people. And then here in Boston, I'm just curious how many people are actually in Boston living. Seems like about a third, and 2/3, traveling. This is such a great event. But yeah, I did some consulting with the Boston Red Sox, and then ended up, I helped get Pedro Martinez here. But then in addition to analytics, have been a major league scout. So that's one of the big topics is what can you get insights from pure data versus the culture and actually talking to people and how you affect change. And can't think of any better example of trying to change people's behaviors and processes than in sports, where you're a very old school environment. So going from there, I worked for Oracle. So kind of my career parallels what I see as the industry. Back then it was just almost very little data out there. It was kind of structured. Worked for Oracle, eventually made my way and became the president of the worldwide Oracle user group, 22,000 members around the world. Relational databases took off like every company, believe it or not, didn't know if they needed a relational database or some centralized, highly available system, and it was the best thing at the time. And it's wild to think now that a lot of what Oracle, in relational databases, could be considered legacy, since there's now been a progression since then. And then along the way, we worked in mobile technology, worked at Palm Computing, who made, before there was Blackberries and iPhones, and started one of the first mobile business software companies. So that whole mobility and social media leading to unstructured data, and spent the last year in kind of the circus, traveling around the world with McLaren Formula One racing, using artificial intelligence to help Lando Norris, Daniel Ricciardo, and their team be better athletes and engineer a better car. And with that completely unstructured data, video, text, health information, all real-time streaming. So that's also where I see the marketplace heading now. It used to be structured, relational, historical information, what you might call a data warehouse, and then the data lake, which is machine learning, predictive analytics. How do you leverage unstructured data? So I've seen all of that, and then of course, it would be remiss to not mention large language models and generative AI. That's kind of where we are now, and Databricks just had this amazing conference, Data and AI Summit, where that was one of the themes, but the main theme was generation AI, which is a play on the words of generative AI, which I love, since everyone in this room and on the live stream, this is our time to shine. We have not really finalized the standards, so it's really up to us now to make sure we can get the most value, most ethically, and it's still the next chapter to be developed. And then speaking of ethics, I always encourage data for good. Hopefully everyone has something in their heart they're close to. And for me personally, I use data and AI to help find missing in action and prisoners of war globally. So in my spare time from Databricks, I am also the president of the investigation into the fate of Raoul Wallenberg, who is a Swedish diplomat hero, disappeared in the Soviet Gulag, and have been there many times to use data to input and find out what happened to him and his driver. Along the way, we did find several missing in action people, which is important to their families. So I hope I can encourage everyone to do something AI and data for good. That's kind of my story and where I see the industry. You know, there's the new terminology of the data warehouse, the data lake, and now it's the lake house, which is the intersection, like one environment that unifies like these two disparate, completely incompatible systems. So you don't have to have data in multiple places. You can have one governance. I was in Tom Davenport's presentation. He's like, instead of governance, let's use enablement. But you know, to have one environment where everything's in one place, super scalable. You can talk about trillions of records, real-time streaming. When you can combine structured and unstructured data to do machine learning, you can get like the most actionable insights. So encourage to follow me on LinkedIn, probably the other panelists as well, to give my thoughts. But with that, I wanted to open it up to the panel. Why don't we, you know, I'll start closest to me and then farther away, and then we can go ad hoc after. But you know, just in general, introduce yourself, like what your company does, and a little bit purview of what your role entails.
Wonderful. Ari, thanks. So while we were preparing for the panel, we were discussing, I think this is going to be much more entertaining if Ari were to talk about his interactions with Brad Pitt during Moneyball, rather than us telling about the data stories, right? Like, so, very excited to be here. I represent the Marsh Wrigley team. So unfortunately, I have not brought any M&M's or Snickers for you. I lead the global one-demand. I lead the global one-demand data and analytics function for Marsh Wrigley. So I lead a team of data engineers, data scientists, DevOps engineers, and the value creators, what we call as the business translators. We believe and implement in a value first or a business problem first, data second kind of a philosophy. Really excited to be here to talk about some of the accomplishments from our broader team and talk about what is the culture that we are trying to implement within Mars. From a background standpoint, I'm a mechanical engineer. I started my career as a robotics engineer, so it is as technical as it can get. I did my business school and became a digital transformation expert. Most of my CPG experience is with Coca-Cola company. I did analytics consulting and before moving to Mars. One additional aspect that I would tell that when I did digital transformation analytics work at Coke, I used to report into the business. So in many meetings I've gone and told that like CIO function slows down the data and analytics, it should be business led. Then fate would have it, then I reported into the CIO function in the next job. And we worked really hard to make sure that there is a zero distance to the decision making here. At Mars, I played two roles, and in my current role, we were able to data analytics as a function used to report into the CIO or a technical function. And I think as we have made progress, now it reports into the business, and we are driving value, we are able to track value, and we are able to make progress there. Over to you, Anjali.
Good morning, everyone. I am Anjali Gupta Reddy. I am Chief Data Officer with Dow Jones. So we have, consumer brands like Wall Street Journal, Barron's, MarketWatch. We also have our B2B businesses like Factiva, you might have heard, Newswires, etc. So we are a news company. Our parent company is News Corp. My mandate is to, we're trying to transform a company from a news company into a news and data company. So my remit goes across the entire company and very complex businesses from a perspective of combination of B2C and B2B businesses. I lead, my mandate is to create an overall cohesive strategy for the company, which encompasses, data governance, privacy, data engineering, analytics, business intelligence, and now AI ML. So, I champion AI ML strategy for our company. So there's a lot of things that are going on from a generative AI standpoint, like Ari mentioned, how do we balance what we're trying to create from an analytics perspective using Gen AI or AI, and how do we balance that with the ethics around, what are the right things to do and how do we continue to create value. Like Deepak, I also have, it's very important that we have, somebody who champions from a business standpoint the cause of data analytics. So I have solution advisors on my team who work very, very closely with the businesses to understand, business problems and how to solve for them. And all along my career, I felt like, for data functions, it's really important to kind of translate, what the problems the business is trying to solve for, and then how do we make it easier in a layman language to understand what is it and how do we and the value, that we are delivering. So the ROI. Prior to Dow Jones, so really interesting role. We have, 1,500 editors in our newsroom. We also collect information from thousands of publishers across the world. Prior to this, I was at Citibank, and what's unique about my career is I've traversed different industries. So Citibank, was head of data analytics, also global data governance officer. Prior to that, I spent 12 years at Dun & Bradstreet, which is a world-renowned data company, and literally did everything what I call the day in the life of a piece of data, right? Like how do you collect data, how do you acquire it, ingest it, create, analytics, insights, and finally predictive analytics. And prior to that, I was with Honeywell, which is a manufacturing company. So really excited about this forum, and I'm going to hand it over to Diana now.
Great, thank you. Okay, hi everyone. I'm Diana Schildhaus. I'm the Chief Analytics and Insights Officer for Colgate-Palmolive. So we are a global leader in oral care, personal and home care, skin health, as well as pet nutrition. If anyone is familiar with the Hills or Science Diet brands, if you have pets, that's part of Colgate's portfolio as well. I've been at Colgate for 2 years now. My role was newly created when I joined, bringing together with a mandate to build an enterprise strategy for advanced analytics, specifically how to actually achieve tangible business value out of our analytics activities, and also combined with our insights function, and so a focus as well on people centricity in the work that we do. In terms of my background, I actually started in finance for the Walt Disney Company. I have an MBA and then went to work for a company called Westfield, which is a global shopping mall developer, leading strategy, insights, and analytics there. And then prior to Colgate, I was at Mattel, which is a global toy company. I'm sure everyone is familiar with the Barbie brand nowadays. You really can't escape it, as well as Hot Wheels and Thomas the Train, Fisher-Price, some of those brands as well. At Mattel, I was brought in initially to create the business insights and business analytics team. So they knew that they wanted to do something with all their data, but they didn't really know what that actually looked like. And so that was a blank slate job as well. And in my 8 years there, I built that advanced analytics team. It was Mattel's first team of data scientists, and then added on insights as well as corporate strategy, and then finally mergers and acquisitions, all under my remit at the end. And then joined Colgate. We are doing some amazing things there. It's been, I'm 2 years and 3 months in, although as Tom Davenport was speaking yesterday about that 2.5 mark, I was, thinking like, okay, so far so good, but I should keep that in mind. But it's a company that I think, again, had enthusiasm for what data and analytics could do coming in, and it was happening in pockets, certainly, but we were really lacking that enterprise vision strategy on how to actually get tangible business value, which for us means revenue, ultimately, from our use of data and analytics. And so, we've sort of gone on the whole journey. I think we're going to talk about a lot of these elements today with culture and senior level buy-in and literacy and upskilling and all those elements. And now are, at a really great point of momentum where we have those tangible use cases showing value and continuing to invest, and future has a lot of potential in this space for us.
Well, fantastic. These are like three of the most amazing and diverse companies I can imagine, and your backgrounds as well. Disney and everything, and like these are large, established, long tenured companies, and people are curious, how do you structure your organization? Who do you report into? And then like what is the goal? Sometimes it's operational, get stuff done. Sometimes it's like cultural, strategic. Sometimes you're focused only internally, and sometimes you're like an external. Like clearly here you are external, but how do you organize?
So I can start on that. So I report to the president of Colgate. Under her remit, besides analytics and insights, there's digital, global marketing, supply chain, R&D, innovation, and IT. So it situates me very close to the business, which I think is really important in terms of driving influence from a role like ours. So our IT organization, that the leader of that is a peer of mine. We both report to the same person, the president. In terms of team structure, so with a company as broad as Colgate, we operate in over 200 markets around the world. We are employing what we call a center-led hybrid approach. So full centralization really doesn't work when you're trying to drive impact in a company that broad. We have 34,000 employees around the world. However, we also know that full dispersal or fragmentation also is not going to work when you're trying to really bring new capabilities to bear and sort of up level in terms of how advanced the analytics are that you're doing for the company. So in terms of structure, I have a global central team that's based in New York and New Jersey, our headquarters. And then I have teams that sit across other functions and then our geographic divisions as well. So it's a sort of matrixed web of hard line, dotted line, all sorts of different reporting relationships. But I think importantly in a company like Colgate, where the talent is so dispersed around the world, creating that community of analytics professionals, whether or not they hardline to you. I mean, I certainly sort of act like they hardline to me, even if they don't, and that's working out so far. But really having that community, because in many cases there will be analytics practitioners who are sitting in a market far away, and they report to someone who is not an analytics expert. And so, they're very close to the business, but they're not getting the kind of technical guidance or leadership or, career development conversations that they would have if they were part of a community. So that's, I think, one of the most important things that we've brought about in terms of the structure and how the company's organized, is creating those centrally led communities, regardless of where the talent sits around the world. And then lastly, I would just add that as far as the most advanced expertise that we've been building up, that has been in the central team. I think as we, the central global team, as we continue to advance in terms of maturity, I think likely what will happen is that will sort of push out more to divisions as we're able to build that maturity there as well.
Sure, great. I report, I'm part of the executive leadership team for the CEO of the company. I also report into our Chief Experience Officer, who leads product and technology, as well as a user experience. So it's really great to be part of a business. As Diana mentioned, my focus is really to create new data capabilities, new data products. And it's less of a siloed job, but it's really working very, very closely with the product team, with the UX team, with all of our business functions, all of our general managers, to kind of create a repository of use cases that will drive revenue for the company. So we are hyper-focused, laser-focused, I would say, in terms of creating capabilities, harnessing the power of this immense amount of news information we have, news data that comes in from across the globe, and then drive use cases that will drive EBITDA, profit margins, and revenue for the company. So this means that the model we have in place is a central team that works very, very closely with the businesses. We have regular conversations with them. So every 3 months we sit down. Now that I've been with the company over a year now, and we have a strategy and a roadmap in place, which is very, very tangible. It's broken down into quarters. So we will sit down with the businesses and say, hey, what are the key problems that you're trying to solve for? What are the pain points in your businesses? Let me understand it. So I personally have one-on-ones with the businesses, and then my teams would kind of sit down and paint that roadmap of deliverables. for the next 3 months. And then we have conversations. Like I said, I have people that are data experts. I mean, they're in the core, they're data analytics people, but they also wear that business hat. So they understand revenue and profit margins and how do you grow and market sizing and how much addressable market size we have and how do we gain that market share. So I think in my role and the way I have structured the team, and my mantra is, let's really understand, how do we, empathy, right, for the business. What shoes are you sitting in and what are you trying to solve for, and how can data, accessibility to data, the insights, the intelligence will help you run your business better. So we have lots of different functions in my centralized team, all the way from collection of billions of pieces of insights from Wall Street Journal and Barron's and MarketWatch. Who's engaging? How do we use that to personalize the information for our readers? So, Deepak comes in and reads the Wall Street Journal as a personal consumer versus Deepak, head of Mars Analytics, and what content would he want? So all of this information, we're using advanced analytics for it. So that's one part of it. Second is, how do we drive business intelligence? So how do we inform our sales teams and our businesses in terms of pricing analytics? How do we price our products? The third would be, data governance and privacy. I came from Citibank where, we were under a consent order. So privacy and governance is really at the heart of me. Like, we have to do business very, very responsibly. We have to mitigate risk. So we're working on generative AI initiatives across the company. I'm leading a task force around it. So, but we have to do business ethically. And then I have data engineering, which is all about the power of this data. How do you store it in cloud, and how do you derive it? How do we plug in third-party capabilities to be able to do master data management, make the, the ingestion processes, the extraction of the data and the insights very, very nimble. And then, culture. So we're going to talk a lot about culture, but culture and literacy is really important. So we have, monthly data forums, we have weekly forums, we have 15-minute, me going in and talking to the teams. And, we are bringing in external speakers. We have newsletters going. We're a news company, but we still have newsletters going across the company in terms of what's happening in the market space, especially in the last 6 months around AI. So it's really a hub and spoke model. And I think it doesn't really matter how many people are in the centralized team versus in the businesses. I think the goal is to be able to evangelize the mission around driving revenue and value for the company, which is, I would say really, really hard. But then influencing the teams to do what, from a thought leadership standpoint, really ingrain that message and have them kind of move together as one team.
Very good. So, tough act to follow after this, actually. So, I'll talk about the team structure a little bit and our digital transformation mindset. At Mars, we have built a program which is part of our digital transformation called the On-Demand Data and Analytics. Now, our key message to the organization is that our rally call is always going to be business-led, analytics-enabled. This is not a technology transformation program. So, along with me, we have a HR, or we call it the people and piano partner, who helps us upskill the organization, give individual business objectives to the leadership to upskill themselves, various business owners, etc. I also have a finance partner who looks at the value creation, the auditing of it. As an analytics lead, I don't want to mark my own homework. So there are multiple players within the team who plays an equally important role to build the data and analytics program a success. Now, one of the lucky things for me is that the sponsor of the program is the CFO, which kind of makes sure that there is a value behind whatever activities that we are doing. Our key performance metrics is the net margin. At Mars, we call it margin after conversion. MAC is the key objective for the whole team. even if you are a data engineer, data scientist, or a business translator, we are in the purpose of driving that value to the business. Now, when it comes to the one-demand mindset, I think this is something which I want to highlight. See, as any large retailer or CPG, you would have heard this quote from Sam Walton, which he told several decades back. Purpose of any organization is to give the best consumer experience, not just the best, but legendary. That still holds true. And how can a large CPG company like Mars do this complex task in this omni-channel world? Now, you would have heard the story of 4 blind people explaining an elephant. Somebody touching the leg, calling it something, somebody touching the tail, calling it something else. And that happens quite a lot within large organizations. So sales as a function explains the elephant in the room in a certain way. Marketing as a function calls the same elephant a different thing. Supply chain, it goes on and on, right? And as the one-demand program we are building, it was our mindset was we are not going to operate with a sales mindset, a marketing mindset, a supply chain mindset. We are going to have a one-demand mindset. And it is not going to be an analytics-led strategy. It is always going to be business-led strategy sponsored by the CEO. And that has completely transformed how Mars is looking at analytics and how we are looking at value creation. Now, one more aspect that I want to add is on the data and the digital talent. I think the biggest asset for all of us is going to be the digital talent in the near future. Now, yesterday during one of the panels, see, most of the time, a digital talent spends, and my team generally tells me, we spend 6 months in alignment to do 6 weeks of work. I mean, that's a problem in large organizations. While it is difficult to change that right away, but I think we have to work hard towards changing it. We are not expecting a data scientist who is really, really smart from MIT to come and join, do 6 months of alignment with people who might not be, so that's not going to be a scalable model. As an organization, we'll go behind if that is the future. And I think that is something that we are actively working on. How can we empower the team so that they can drive innovation faster? So that's a little bit about it.
Wonderful. And Deepak, I love your 4 blind person. I'll remember that. But it leads to the point of why you want master data management or some centralized, unified like data hub. Like I've seen in some of the companies I worked with, like what is a sale? One department thinks it's like as soon as you scan at the counter, the other, I have family members who try things out and then they return like 2 of the 3. So a sale is not complete until like the return policy period is over. But if you have 10 departments with 10 definitions, that's not a good thing. And yeah, Anjali, I will take you up on the offer to speak about culture and add to it literacy. And before I open it up, like data IQ, Diana, you were on another session yesterday, and there's a wealth of information, like with surveys of what do all different companies view culture, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities. So I believe that's recorded, you watch, or you could just go to the website of like what the latest survey, through 2023 has been across all large companies. But why don't I open it up to, love to hear your thoughts on culture and then like data literacy. Why is it important? What are your thoughts?
Sure. So I think culture is really, really important. And I've always been a believer that it's, we talk about process, technology, access, and people. I think in my mind, talent and people is the most important. I mean, so bringing in the right kind of people who really understand the value of data is super, super important. So culture is extremely important as a component to the success of any data initiatives, whether it's establishing the strategy or executing on it. And I think in my mind, there are 3 big things around it. Number 1 is it needs to be driven from the top. So, the CEO, the executive leadership team, we have to talk about culture and about data and the importance of it at every single town hall, at every single steering committee, at, in newsletters, in media, et cetera, et cetera. So it really comes from the top. Number 2 is the credibility of data and the quick wins and the value it drives for the company. So I think at every single moment we have to ensure that people have number 1, the data team is making data accessible to the different businesses. And not only that, which is, for example, in my team, we have data engineering, we have platform, we manage that. We, have this data mesh approach, which I thoroughly believe in, which is, let's figure out what problems the company is trying to solve for. Number 1, number 2, and number 3. 3 big problems. Let's not go beyond that. And if we take those problems, for example, if it's understanding like how much business we have with the top clients, what's the balance of trade with them, let's figure out what data is important, where does it sit, and let's use the data mesh concept of kind of picking up those data sets and putting them into an environment, whatever it might be, cloud here or CDP, and then curate and govern that data, create a data catalog, and then start to drive use cases from that, which is enabling the sales teams who are in front of the customers to say, okay, I'm going to go talk to Google. How much business do I have? Should I be talking to Google in San Francisco or in New York? Who are the executives I should be, So my vision is that, let's enable our sales teams who are really having a hard time in today's economy to drive revenue and enable them so that he or she is having coffee in the morning. They know I'm going to be visiting Google at San Francisco, what our balance of trade is, who am I going to talk to, that person's LinkedIn information should be at the fingertips, and then what pitch am I going to make? That's the role of data analytics. So I think that's number 2, which is accessible data and the value of data and really driving, really marketing the success we've had with data. And number 3 is training, right? Like, we've had a lot of Coursera courses. I would say everything that we need to do in terms of, me talking to the teams about data. What is data? What's business analytics? What's advanced analytics? What generative AI? What's AI? So a lot of, in companies, there's so much confusion around data is complex, right? Like, what is data? And what are these different things? So it's as simple as me and my team talking to our company about what is data, what's advanced analytics, and then we bring in external speakers, we bring in, we enable our teams to go and get training through digital media, it's Coursera, Udemy, et cetera, et cetera. So I think 3 things, to summarize. Number 1, it needs to be driven from the top. And I think Accenture did a great job of it. I mean, Accenture was a consulting company, but they transformed themselves into a digital transformation company. And if you look at their history and what they've done, they were talking about digital transformation everywhere. And look at the impact. They're driving lots of revenue through that. So that's number 1. Number 2 is, accessibility of data and proving the value and the revenue and really evangelizing that across the company. And number 3 is really upskilling the teams.
I can just add on to that on the literacy program and agree with all of your points on that, Anjali. I think one of the fundamental tenets of the literacy program that we put in place was the concept that data is part of everyone's job at the company, not just me and my team, not just the data team. So that really required all of us to be speaking the same language, understanding what a data scientist does versus a data analyst versus an engineer, et cetera, and when teams need to hire, which role teams need to hire. Again, we're operating in so many countries around the world. And as we all know, if you think that you want a data scientist, you bring them in, there's no data, and then you ask them to make some reports for you, they'll soon be leaving us and going to one of your companies. So that common language and understanding of what all of this actually means, demystifying the jargon and the lingo, was really a key part of what we were trying to do with the literacy and upskilling program. And then I would add it in terms of the success that we've seen in upskilling. This is a program that we've put the entire company through. So all salaried and professional employees, from the CEO to entry-level analysts, have taken these courses, and it is not one size fits all. So I mentioned in yesterday's panel, we started with an assessment, and that sort of unlocked, it was confidential. Only the person who took it saw their result. And that unlocked a pathway of, okay, you're in marketing or you're in sales and this was your score. These are the next 3 recommended courses for you to take that are relevant to where you're at and also relevant to your role. Because we need to train our practitioners in more advanced techniques, but then if you're in sales, you need to feel comfortable taking the outputs of the analytics and the data work to a retailer, for example, and feel confident that you can bring those insights and present them. And when they ask a couple questions, you feel confident that you can answer those. So the training is very customized. I'll put in a plug for a couple of the partners that we used on that. Data Camp really did an amazing job. We got access for their, I think their full library for the entire, again, salaried and professional organization. So people who were interested in things beyond what was recommended to them as a next step had full access. And then we used an organization called the Presentation Company, which was much more about data storytelling and communication with data. And we had a lot of success with that. The last piece was badges, which I stood corrected on this, because when we were talking with our learning team, they said, if you take these 5 elements, you get this badge, and then you get that badge. And I thought, does anyone care about badges? Turns out they really do care about badges. And they were all over LinkedIn. And what was so great was seeing our leadership, including our CEO, post his badge saying he completed, the Data Science 101, all the courses that you had to take to earn that. And we had country managers around the world saying, I didn't know anything about this space, and now I feel so much more empowered, and I'm telling my teams they need to take it too. So when you get that senior level buy-in, to your point, Anjali, around how important this is, it's part of everyone's job. I think that's when the magic starts to happen.
I think if I were to add, so I've seen Diana posting quite a lot about badges. I never understood. It's really powerful. So I think we talked about the data literacy quite a bit. So I think one more aspect that I want to add is on the change management. I think as an organization, as we went through different stages of analytics maturity, we always started with, hey, we want to build the best toolkits or the capabilities, but we didn't, in the beginning, spend enough time on the culture or the change management aspect specifically. What I've learned in the last 5 years at Mars is that for every dollar that you invest in building a good analytical tool or data, I think we should spend that equal $1 in driving the change management, training and upskilling. That is going to have an exponential impact. So we are a 100+ year old company, more than 125,000 associates, and I think we cannot emphasize enough on the role of change management. We have to put ourselves in the shoes of the business. They have been in the business, and that's the reason why large companies exist. So they know the winning formula. And I think our ability to adapt the process, which the seasoned associates can adopt, it is going to be very important.
Well, wonderful. So just a time check, we have about 8 minutes left. So I want to ask at least one more question, then see if there's any Q&A. Is that good?
Should we go to Q&A?
Sure.
Straight away?
Yeah,
we should do that.
Anyone have
Questions?
Questions? If not, I have 12 off the head.
So Diana, you talked a little bit about having a hybrid, centralized, distributed model, however you describe it. How do you ensure centralized standards but still give people autonomy and flexibility? How do you manage that balance?
Yeah, so I think that upskilling program that I just talked about was actually a big enabler of that, because it helped us. We had that assessment, we had those results, so we were able to look across talent that was dispersed around the organization and understand where we needed to focus on certain training or upskilling more than other areas. And then I'd say generally, just in terms of managing that type of a model, lots of communication. So we do global town halls every quarter. I have one-on-ones with every division and key market analytics leader. There are other forums. We have a council that comes together. So we have there's a data and analytics community of practice that meets without me, but they all get together. So we have a lot of forums for communication. I think there's a stat, and I'm not going to say it right, but something around having to say your message 7 times before people really understand or absorb it. And so in the beginning, there was a lot of time spent on, we developed our strategy. It was one page. I really believe in the one pager. Clee, who's on my team, has heard me, knows all about that. Simplicity of message and vision is so important. And there was a lot of kind of road showing and representing, all around the world when I started, just to make sure everyone really understood what we were marching towards, why it was important, what value we were going to be adding to the company. Because if you're a data scientist sitting in our Kenya office, I want that person to understand how what they're doing ladders up to our enterprise strategy and know that they're on the right path. Because of course, I can't be talking to that person all the time. So I think that crystal clear vision of what you're trying to do and cascading that out frequently is really important to managing that type of model, where you have global and then you have dispersed, divisional and market teams too.
Can the panel comment on the foundational elements of how you're underlying the analytics infrastructure? Are you taking a data products approach, a data fabric or mesh approach to create the foundational accessible data layer that can be consumed? Can you comment on that, please?
Yeah. Is that for me or anybody? One of you guys could jump in on it.
Sure, I can take it. So, the approach I'm taking is data is everywhere across the company. And I've seen that, all through my career in every single company I worked at. And if you try to boil the ocean, it would not lead you anywhere. And I've seen companies fail because you try to do too much at one time. So the approach we're taking is, it's what's going to drive, what's the number 3 things in the company that are going to drive revenue and profit margins for the company. Let's align with the executive leadership team, let's align with the businesses, and that takes immense amount of time, right? And especially in this economy, companies do not have the funding, etc. So, and then break that down into what data sets do we need to be successful. And then identify, create a SWAT team of people from across the centralized team and the businesses to really nail down the data sets and bring those data sets into a cloud environment. And that's really a data mesh approach. And what happens is, so for example, I talked about customer information, right? So that lives in SAP, it lives in financial systems, it lives in a lot of legacy systems. And there are people within the companies that know where that data sits. So bring it all together. And so for example, if we're bringing data from one team that's finance team, they need to have a data steward that will qualify the quality of that data. So they are the producers, we are the consumers in the central team. We will then create data governance around it. And really it's, what's the problem, what data do we need? It's a data mesh concept. And then we become sort of a marketplace that can then make that data available to different businesses for a variety of use cases. And you can scale it. So the idea would be, let's have a domain around 1P data. Let's have a domain around financial information, customer information, and product information. And believe me, it's hard, but in my own experience, I've seen this being more successful than if you try to boil the ocean and create a CDP platform or a large platform.
Yeah, I think one thing that I would add, this is specifically applicable for CPG and retail. So traditionally, a CPG and retail would work with third-party data like Nielsen IRI, the customer data, and our internal financial data sources, right? Internal data sources as a broad bucket. Now, we have the new sources like zero-party data, first-party data, and second-party data, which is there, and it is important to create that integrated data layer to have one single source of truth. While many people within the company or many functions within the company can ingest the data, the service as a data analytics function that we do is we are creating a semantic layer or a curated layer in which every data product can sit on top of it. So that, you don't want the sales function to have a gross margin which looks like different for a marketing function. Because then it becomes, if you torture the data enough, right, they can tell whatever truth that they want to tell. So having that quality data, which is can be a single source of truth, is very important. So that semantic layer that's something that we are building.
Great. Well, we have 2 minutes left. Why don't we take the final question?
Oh, real quick. So just Deepa, I'm going to give you my address so you can ship my samples to me. So, But I heard culture defined once as knowing what to do in the morning and how to go about it without being told, right? And I've noticed in very successful companies that have a strong data culture, they also have expectations about that. So fact-based decisions, experimentation and test and learn, measurement, all key things. So are you all also trying to influence what those sort of norms and values and expectations are? I see a lot of nodding, so that's a good.
Sure. So, I mean, like we're putting a lot of guardrails, especially now in this environment, with generative AI, what you can and cannot do with large language models, right? We want to be very ethical and not violate any copyrights for anybody who we procure data from. Plus the same thing, right? We want to make sure that, we are not diluting the value of our content. So a lot of, guardrails are being put across experimentation, who are you working with, et cetera, et cetera. And to that extent, we've created like an AI ML task force across the company, which has 4 or 5 different work streams. A, understanding what's happening in the marketplace. Second, legal, ethical standards. Third is experimentation. Fourth is how do we use this, immense amount of use cases across the company in different departments, et cetera, and put some kind of a governance around it so we are marching together as a company and not violating any standards.
So quite similar for us at Mars. We have a 70-20-10 rule, 70 on scaling data products globally so that it keeps on adding value, 20% of the efforts towards improving that 70% product, and 10% on innovation, the futuristic capability like generative AI, etc. So the 70 plus 20 will continue to generate value to the organization, and the 10% kinds of help us future proof. So that's how we do it.
I'll just close with one quick tip in case relevant to you or any of your companies. One of the best things you can do with the senior level support is give your senior leaders examples of questions to ask their teams in meetings once analytics solutions or tools have been rolled out to them to make sure they're being used. Like if you give them a cheat sheet of here's 3 questions to ask about some new media analytics that you've scaled to their team, having their leader ask them the questions is a really quick way to make sure that they're using it. Exactly, yes. Modeling the behavior. Quick tip.
And my summary was serendipitous that Paul's slide had all of those priorities ranked #1. And one of my favorite movies of all time was City Slickers. If you've seen it or haven't seen it, the theme, guy keeps holding up the finger #1 of like, what do you want your priority in life to be? That's the mystery. So I'll leave you with that parting thought of good luck in all of your journeys, finding out what your top priorities are, and hopefully from this wonderful panel, they gave some insights into what worked for them. So thank you for your attention, and best of luck.
Just before, while I've got you, if you would like to view the full list, have a look at our website. That's the email, the web address. Find out more about our great panel, and you can enter yourselves for next year, or your colleagues, or someone great in the industry. Do not forget to submit. Thank you very much.